Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in today. You're watching In Deep on the Delta, and today we're going to talk about a worming technique that I call carpet bombing. The last few months out on the Delta, everybody's talking worms, 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 and they say you've got to fish them slow to catch fish, and that's probably true. But if you're like me, I like to find a bank, I like to throw buzz baits, I like to throw chatterbaits, I like to throw crankbaits. I move along that bank and power fish it and fish it fast. Carpet bombing is a technique that I use to slow myself down. I've got to do this to slow myself down to maximize my worm fishing. And if you are the person that sounds like me, this is going to be a great video for you. So let's get right into it. Let's start off with my general worming rigs, and I want to say that this time of year on the Delta, when I'm fishing worms, I'll have 4 worm setups sitting on my boat at all time. We're going to go over my standard setup and then a couple of alternative rigs. Now for my wacky weightless and Nico, I'm going to be using a shorter rod. I found that maybe a 6'10" to a 7-foot medium heavy rod works really well for me. That gives me good accuracy and it allows me to pitch cast. And we're going to talk about pitch casting and how important that is out here on the Delta. The reel, use the reel that you have on. If it's 6 to 1, 7 to 1, don't worry about it. Adjust to what you need it to do. Slow down, speed up, do whatever you want to do. Just a good reel, any good reel, but I suggest on my light rods I'm using 40-pound braid. On my heavier rods I'm using 55-pound braid, and I will put about 4 to 6 feet of anywhere from 12 to 20-pound test mono leader. So this time of year, when I'm starting to see big females, I will switch out all of my leader to 18 to 20 pound test. The winter months, when we were getting more, those 2 to 4 pound fish, I keep it around 10 to 12. I get more bites with the lighter leader, but I don't want to lose a big fish because I'm too light this time of year. So the first rig we're going to talk about is a simple weightless wacky worm. This could also be a Nico rig if we put a nail weight in it. I'm using just a standard wacky hook. I'm not really going into the actual rigging of this. So that's one rod that I will have. The next rod that I like to use is a weightless, same rod, 55-pound braid. This has, I think, 18-pound leader. I'll use an inline worm hook with no weight, and we all know how to rig that up. And the reason I like to have this worm on there is because in areas where I'm fishing heavy vegetation, when I set this up weightless, I can make it really weedless, where the wacky worm is not so weedless. I love fishing the wacky worm, but there are places where you can't fish that wacky worm when it's heavy vegetation. Let's see, my third rig here is simply a drop shot. I don't have a weight on this one, but standard drop shot, and I'll use a robo worm or something of that nature. That's my third rig that I always have on the boat. And last but not least, I will use kind of a T rig, or this is one that you should be looking at, and this is a Tokyo rig. You've all seen those, and I have a baby brush hog on there, but these are really great. And I will fish a worm on this. I might fish a beaver. When I'm talking about worms, it's primarily worms, but obviously if you're fishing T-rigs or something, you can always throw a creature bait of some type on. So that is the standard rig, and we're going to go over the way that I like to fish certain areas. And I think you can see what we have behind me here. Generally, that's an area that if you think there's fish in there, you got a dock, you've got some vegetation, you've got a ledge, there's a lot of things that you can fish in there. But for most of us to throw out, drop that, wait for that worm to get down there and just slowly inch it in, it's killer. You never fish it slow enough, and you basically, I won't say you waste your time, but if you're not getting the fish on the drop, you're probably not catching the fish and you're not fishing slow enough. So we're going to get right into the technique that I call carpet bombing. Alright guys, the first setup we're going to use is a weightless wacky. It is start of April, we have, let's just say 3 to 5 feet of water out here, and I want to fish this really slow. Now generally, when we talk about fishing a worm slow, we're going to pitch it out, we're going to let it get to the bottom, and remember, most of our fish, or a high percentage of our fish that take a wacky worm are going to hit it on the fall. So that's a really important time of the cast. But once we get that on the bottom, we're going to really just kind of work it as slowly as we can. Just inch it along, painfully slow, so slow. By the time you do this for 10 minutes, most of us, if you're like me, are sick of fishing this way. This is the carpet bombing technique, and we will use it with all 4 types of these rigs. Wacky worm, T-rig, weightless T-rig, Tokyo rig, or a drop shot. The technique would be to simply make your cast, follow that worm down to the bottom, making sure it hits the bottom. I can see my worm is on the bottom right now. I'm going to wait for 10 seconds before I move that bait. Was that 10 seconds? No. And the amount of time that you're going to wait, it could be 5 seconds, it could be 10 seconds, it could be 15 seconds. You want to vary that time on your first initial drop to let that worm set, because a lot of times the fish will come up and look at it, but they won't hit it. It'll take them a minute to inspect it, and then they'll hit it. After you've done your 10-second soak, you want to just barely tap, not moving the rig, just giving it action. So it's not moving from here to here, it's moving from here to here, but you've got that action. That's another critical time when you're going to get most of your bites. Once you've done that, I'll drag it a foot, let it set for maybe 5 seconds. Maybe it'll be 2 or 3 seconds, depending on the day and how aggressive the fish are. I'll tap it again. If I don't get bit, I'm reeling in, and I'm going to make another cast 6 to 10 feet away from the last cast, and I'm going to repeat. It's on the bottom, let it sit for 5 to 10 seconds. Just touch the line and let it sit for a few seconds. Do it again. If you get nothing, you're reeling it back in and going another 10, 15 feet out, in, over, just different areas. Do not repeat the cast to the same area more than once. Give that fish one time to hit it, unless you're fishing a bed or you're fishing a corner of a dock or a very specific place. You may want to make a couple of casts, but don't waste your time with repeated casting to the same spot as a general rule. Now, I have been fishing a weightless wacky on that. If you are fishing a very weedy area and you're getting hung up, that's when I'll drop this and I'll go with a weightless, basically this is a cut-tail worm on that, it's a weightless T-rig on an inline worm hook. The reason I like this is because if I make that same cast, I'm still going to let it drop, let it sit for 5 or 10 seconds. And when it's on the bottom, instead of maybe giving it a pop, I'll move it just with the reel handle, very slow, but only this much. Just enough to move it through the vegetation. It's not an aggressive shake of the worm, it's a very slight movement of the worm. And by using these two techniques, the Nico rig or the weightless wacky and the weightless inline worm, you can cover a lot of ground. If I can't catch fish with these two techniques, I'll probably go to the drop shot and I'll start fishing that, maybe with a robo worm, and just moving this very slowly. But I'm not moving it all the way back in. I'm gonna move it a little bit. I'm gonna take it, and again, throwing it out to a different area I'm not covering the same area. I'm carpet bombing this whole area. As it gets down there, try to wait 10 seconds. Move it slowly. Once, let it sit. Twice, let it sit. Maybe you can give it a little pop just to see if they'll take it on that more aggressive action. And then you're reeling in and doing it again. This is going to allow you to continue to be active so that you can do this over the course of the day without falling asleep. And every day is different. So that initial drop, obviously we're hoping to get a bite on that. It could be a 5-second wait, a 10-second wait. If you can handle it, go 15 or 20 seconds sometimes. That could be the trick. But don't work it all the way back to the boat. Work it a couple of feet like we were talking about, and then reeling it in quickly, and then carpet bombing your next area. Here's some other tips that I'd like to give when it comes to casting. I love pitch casting in an area like this for a couple of reasons. Generally, when the wind's up, with that overhand cast or even a poor sidearm cast, you're going to catch a breeze with your line. So what we're doing by pitch casting is keeping the bait low to the water. As soon as that bait gets close to the water, I slap the line down. Let's do that again, and I'll show you. Watch the action of the rod. That wasn't a very good cast, by the way. We want to get in there, bam, and I want to put that rod tip right on the water. That way the wind has no chance of catching the line and blowing a big bow in it, causing that worm to drag. I want it to drop straight down. I don't want it to fall on a crazy angle. They like it vertical most of the time. So important to do that pitch cast. Slap your line down. Point your rod tip directly at your worm or your bait. Keep your tip low to the water and use your reel to bring it back in. Now, it's not against the law to tap it a little bit, but mostly you want to just use your reel to move it back in. Now, here's another advantage of having your rod up here. If you're doing this and you get a bite, you do have a good hook set. But when you are out there, you drop that. Let's say you get a bite here, or you think you have a bite. You can move the rod into here, feel the weight of it, and then really set on them, and you're down in position to set. If you have the rod down in this angle and you think you're getting a bite, and a lot of times you move the rod a little bit to see if that fish is there, by the time that fish grabs it, you're in this position and it's a tough hook set. You don't have the power of the rod working for you. So just really quick, pitch cast, drop your line right into the water, point your tip at the bait, work it slowly, and keep your tip in front of you so that you can move it and get a good hook set. And that is really the essence of this carpet bombing, and it's just kind of one of those techniques that I'm sure you guys are doing, a lot of you guys are doing, but you have to think about it and say, when I'm going to fish March, April, May, June out here, when the fish aren't really maybe in an aggressive mode, being able to slow down is the key. I did talk about this guy here too, this Tokyo rig, and this is something that's really coming into play on the Delta along with the Ned rigs. And I'm going to do a video on Ned rigs, some of the things that I've been doing. And I know if you've been watching me lately, I said I'm not throwing a Ned rig out on the Delta. I'm not throwing that thing out here. Well, so many people sent in saying, hey, I'm getting them on Ned rigs, I'm getting on Ned rigs. I started using them and I am catching fish. So keep watching, and I am going to do a Delta style Ned rig, because the Ned rig that you use up at Maloney's is not going to suffice out here on the Delta. There will be new things in this, but I really like this Tokyo style rig, and again, worm or creature bait. And in this situation, let me turn the camera around. I'll show you what I have behind me. Okay guys, not the greatest place that I would use this, but in a situation like this where you have some down toolies or maybe some surface vegetation and you're not punching, but you want to get in a little tight, this Tokyo rig a lot of times will be able to get in and get down there and fish a little heavier cover. So that's where the Tokyo rig comes in. It's also great because it anchors itself if you are fishing a bed or if you are fishing a real specific area where you want to soak your bait, because it's got this situation here. It's kind of like what we call a Bubba shot, a heavy drop shot rig. So if I'm fishing out in an area that I want to drape in over those tulies, I can sit it there and just leave it and it'll hold in. And that's the Tokyo rig. You can also fish this just like a Texas rig along the bottom, and I think that this does a little better when it comes to fishing creature baits than it does for worms. So that is the Tokyo rig. That's it, short and sweet. Give that technique a try, and just be aware you can adjust the times and how you fish to what you like to do, but it's basically a technique that you just want to tell yourself you're going to do every now and then when you have to slow down. I know for me, I come out here a lot of times, I know I have to fish slow, but I want to fish fast, and it is just so hard for me to slow down. So with that carpet bombing technique, it allows me to be active and still fish slowly, at least even if it's on the drop and for the first 2 feet of the cast. And remember, that's the critical, or one of the most critical times of your cast. Fish are hitting it on the drop or when it moves that first couple feet. So what we're doing is keeping the bait in the water at a slow pace during our most productive time of the cast, and then forgetting about working it so slow that we're going to all fall asleep. We may catch fish doing that, but for most of us it's super hard. So try the carpet bombing technique. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. I'll be doing again a video coming up on Ned rigs. It will be specifically Ned rigs designed for the Delta, and believe me, I'm doing a lot of out-of-the-box Ned rigging out here. It's working for me on the Delta. It's not perfected yet, but I'm sure with some of your expertise, when you see some of the things I'm doing, especially if you're going up to the mother lode lakes and you build off of the Delta Ned rig techniques, you can send me information and we will fine-tune this Ned rig so that it could be a real killer out here on the Delta. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.